The galaxy, they say, is a graveyard of forgotten empires, vast, cold, and indifferent. Stars burn out, civilizations rise on waves of ambition, only to crash against the jagged rocks of time, leaving behind nothing but dust and silence. For millennia the Cathar hegemony ruled this graveyard, not with benevolence, but with the cold, meticulous efficiency of archivists cataloging extinction. Their crystalline spires pierced nebulae. Their data streams flowed like rivers of light through the void, recording every conquest, every subjugation, every erasure. They believed history was theirs to curate, to sanitize, to own. And humanity. Humanity was a footnote they'd meticulously excised, a smudge on the pristine page of galactic chronology they'd diligently wiped clean, a ghost story whispered only in the deepest, most forbidden sectors of their own archives, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked aggression, quickly dismissed as myth. After all, the Cathar had scoured Sol System clean centuries ago. Every human outpost, every colony, every last cradle of that violent, chaotic species reduced to radioactive slag, or so their records claimed. So their High Curator, Veln the Unblinking, assured the Hegemony Council. The human problem was solved. History was tidy, but history, like ghosts, has a way of refusing to stay buried. Deep within the asteroid belt of a nameless resource-poor system, designated K-77-4, the UNS Resolute hung in the perpetual twilight. Not a warship. Not anymore. A relic. A ghost ship. Its hull scarred by ancient battles, and patched with scavenged plating, or the faded insignia of a United Earth Navy that hadn't existed for 300 years. Inside, the air tasted of ozone, recycled sweat, and the metallic tang of desperation. Captain Aris Thorn, no relation to any forbidden names, just a man forged in the crucible of survival, stood before the main viewport, his reflection a gaunt specter superimposed over the starfield. His eyes, the color of storm clouds over a dead ocean, held the weight of generation. Status, Lieutenant? His voice was gravel-scraped raw, yet it carried the quiet authority that kept this fragile remnant of humanity from fracturing. Lieutenant Kalen, young enough to have only known the void, her fingers dancing over a flickering console salvaged from a Cathar patrol frigate, didn't look up. Passive sensors clear, Captain. No hegemony signatures within 10 light-years. The Resolute's running cold. We're a shadow among shadows. She paused, her knuckles whitening on the edge of the console. But the long-range comms, still picking up that signal. Faint. Persistent. Like a heartbeat from a corpse. Thorn turned, the movement stiff. The archive pulse. Keelan nodded, her dark eyes meeting his. Same frequency. Same encryption key fragment we found etched into the hull of that derelict freighter near Proxima. It's broadcasting our history, Eris. Or what's left of it. Buried deep in the Cathar Central Archive on Viridia Prime. A low murmur rippled through the cramped bridge. Viridia Prime. The heart of the hegemony. The place where humanity's existence had been declared null and void. The place where their ancestors' screams had been filed under administrative error resolved. Impossible, rasped Chief Engineer Boras, his massive frame hunched over an open-access panel, grease smearing his weathered face. They scrubbed us clean, wiped the servers, slagged the monuments, vaporized the records. Even the memory of us is forbidden. How could anything survive? Because they're arrogant, Thorn said, the words tasting like ash. Because they believe their own lies. They think erasure is absolute. But fire leaves scars. Radiation leaves echoes. And hatred. He trailed off, his gaze drifting back to the stars. Hatred leaves ghosts. He remembered his grandfather's stories whispered in the suffocating dark of their generation ship's lower decks. Stories of Earth's blue skies, of oceans that weren't recycled water, of cities that scraped the heavens instead of burrowing into asteroids. Stories the Cathar had deemed dangerous, destabilizing. Stories they'd tried to burn out of existence, and they'd almost succeeded. Only a handful of colony ships, fleeing the initial purge, had escaped into the uncharted void, scattered, broken, forgotten. The Resolute was one of the last. a battered lifeboat carrying the final embers of a species the galaxy had declared extinct. They scavenged, they hid, they fought off pirates and rogue AI, and the crushing despair of knowing they were the last. They were Deathworlders. Yes, forged on a planet that demanded constant struggle just to breathe. But even Deathworlders can drown in the ocean of time. Kalen Thorne ordered, his voice hardening. Plot a course. Maximum stealth protocols. We're going to Viridia Prime. Silence. Thick, heavy, suffocating. Boris slammed his fist against the console, sparks flying. You're mad. That's suicide. A one-way trip into the maw of the beast. We're a rust bucket against their fleet. And what choice do we have, Boros? Thorne's voice was low, dangerous. Fade into the dark. Knowing they won? Knowing they got to rewrite reality itself? Or go down fighting, screaming our truth into the void until the last of us is ash? He looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of his crew, faces etched with exhaustion, fear, but also a stubborn, unyielding spark. They erased us from history. Fine, let them remember us in the fires of their own destruction. The decision hung in the recycled air, sharp as a knife. Kalen swallowed, her fingers flying over the console again, inputting coordinates that felt like a death warrant. Course plotted, Captain. ETA. 3 weeks at best. Stealth velocity. Then we run silent, Thorne said, turning back to the viewport, his silhouette stark against the infinite black. We run silent, and we pray the ghosts are waiting. On Viridia Prime, the heart of the Qatar hegemony, the air hummed with serene crystalline perfection. Towers of iridescent alloy spiraled towards a sky perpetually washed in the soft lavender glow of the system's primary star. Data flowed through transparent conduits like liquid light, carrying the curated history of 1,000 conquered species. Order, control, purity. High Curator Veln the Unblinking stood on the observation spire overlooking the archive Nexus, a vast cathedral-like structure where the collective memory of the hegemony resided. His form was tall, slender, covered in smooth, pearlescent chatin that shifted color with his mood, currently a calm, placid blue. His multifaceted eyes, capable of perceiving spectra invisible to lesser species, scanned the data streams flowing below. Everything was as it should be. Tidy, sanitized. The human anomaly was a closed file, a regrettable violent chapter best forgotten, its lessons absorbed into hegemony doctrine on preemptive pacification. Yet, a faint anomaly flickered at the edge of his perception. A ghost signal. Weak, fragmented, broadcasting on a frequency long decommissioned. It carried echoes, distorted fragments of audio, corrupted visual data, images of blue skies, oceans, faces, human faces, contorted in rage and defiance. It was impossible, illogical. The central archive's firewalls were impenetrable. The human data cores had been physically annihilated centuries ago. Archivist Colrorn. Velen's voice was a soft chime, devoid of inflection. Investigate the anomalous signal on subfrequency Theta 7. Trace its origin. Purge it. Kalon, a junior archivist whose catin shimmered with nervous green, bowed low. Of course, High Curator. But the signal signature. It bears faint markers consistent with pre-purge human data protocols. Could it be a residual echo? A phantom in the system? Velen's chitin darkened to a warning indigo. There are no phantoms in the archive, Kalorn. Only errors, and errors must be corrected. Find the source. Erase it. Thoroughly. The dismissal was absolute. Korvax scroyed away, his mind racing. Residual echoes didn't broadcast new data fragments. They didn't carry the raw, visceral emotion he'd glimpsed in those corrupted images, the sheer, terrifying will to survive radiating from those human eyes. It felt alive, and that was the most terrifying thought of all. The hegemony doctrine was built on the premise that humanity was extinct, a controlled variable. If that variable was active, the implications were catastrophic, unthinkable. As Korn ascended into the labyrinthine depths of the archive Nexus, Veln remained on the spire. The lavender sky seemed less serene. The hum of the city felt less like order, more like the tense silence before a storm. He accessed the highest security logs, the ones detailing the Sol system purge. The reports were flawless, comprehensive, final. All human biomass neutralized, all cultural artifacts destroyed, all historical records expunged. Standard procedure, efficient, clean. But the ghost signal persisted, a tiny, irritating burr in the perfect fabric of hegemony reality. Valen's chaton flickered, a brief, almost imperceptible flash of crimson, the color of unease. He dismissed it as a system glitch. It had to be. The alternative was that the ghosts were real, and ghosts, he knew from the forbidden subarchives, were notoriously difficult to kill twice. The Resolute drifted through the debris field surrounding Viridia Prime's outer defense perimeter like a shark through kelp. 3 weeks of nerve-shredding tension, skirting sensor buoys, riding the blind spots of patrol patterns meticulously mapped from stolen Cathar tactical data. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of fear and stale coffee. Every creak of the hull, every fluctuation in the power grid, sent jolts of adrenaline through the crew. "Patrol cutter, bearing 270 Mark 15, Kalen hissed, her voice tight, closing fast. Active sensors sweeping. Shut down non-essentials. Divert all power to the stealth field," Thorn barked, his knuckles white on the command chair's armrests. The bridge lights dimmed to near darkness, the only illumination the soft glow of critical displays. The hum of the engines died, replaced by the frantic thudding of hearts. The Cathar cutter, sleek and predatory, slid past the Resolute's hiding place behind a tumbling asteroid fragment. Its sensor beams, invisible to human eyes but painting the void in Valen's data streams back on Viridia, swept over their position. Seconds stretched into agonizing eternities. Boros held his breath, a wrench forgotten in his hand. Kalane's fingers hovered over the emergency purge controls, a last resort that would vent their atmosphere but might mask their thermal signature. The cutter paused, hovered, its sensor array swiveled, focusing directly on the Resolute's shadowed flank. Thump, thump, thump. Then, with a silent burst of maneuvering thrusters, it moved on, continuing its patrol. A collective gasp escaped the bridge. Thorn slumped back, wiping sweat from his brow. Too close. Way too close. Stealth field held, Kalen reported, her voice trembling slightly. But it's degrading. We can't keep this up much longer, Captain. The strain on the old reactors. We don't need much longer, Thorn said, his eyes fixed on the planet below, a jewel of lavender and crystal. We're here. Now comes the hard part. Their plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. Infiltrate the archive Nexus during the planetary data synchronization cycle, a brief window when external data streams were momentarily prioritized over internal security protocols. Upload a virus, not to destroy but to reveal, to flood the Hegemony's pristine networks with the raw, unfiltered truth of humanity. The art, the music, the history, the suffering, the defiance. To force the galaxy to remember what the Cathar had tried to erase. Boros had jury-rigged a data spike from scavenged parts, a crude but potent device designed to latch onto the archive's main uplink conduit. Kalen had spent weeks crafting the payload, weaving together fragments of human culture salvaged from hidden caches on derelict ships, encrypted messages from lost colonies, even the final desperate logs from Earth's last stand. It was a digital phoenix, ready to rise from the ashes. Prepare the spike, Thorn ordered. Kalen, you're on point. Boros, you're with her. I'll cover the retreat. Captain, Kalen started. No arguments, Thorn cut her off, his voice brooking no dissent. This is your Epilogue, your creation. You see it through. He met her eyes, seeing the fear but also the fierce determination burning beneath it. Make them remember us, Lieutenant. Make them fear remembering us. Hours later, clad in matte black infiltration suits that drank the starlight, Kalen and Boros launched from the Resolute in a tiny, unpowered pod. It drifted silently towards the gleaming spire of the archive Nexus, a minuscule speck against the planet's grandeur. Inside the pod, the silence was absolute, broken only by the rasp of their breathing and the frantic drumming of their hearts. They landed with a soft thud on a maintenance gantry high on the Nexus's outer wall. The air was thin, cold, smelling of ozone and alien metal. Below, the city pulsed with serene, ordered life. Above, the stars watched indifferent. Conduit access point is 50 meters starboard, Boros whispered, his voice crackling in Kalen's helmet calm. He hefted the bulky data spike. Let's make this quick. They moved like shadows, Kalen leading with practiced grace, Boros and a hulking presence behind her. The access panel was where the stolen schematics said it would be. Kalen worked the lock with trembling fingers, her breath fogging the inside of her visor. The panel slid open, revealing a nest of glowing crystalline fibers, the planet's nervous system. Here goes nothing. Boros grunted, plugging the spike into the main conduit. Lights on the device flared to life. Uploading payload now. Data began to flow. Human history, unfiltered, uncensored, surged into the heart of the hegemony. Kalen watched the progress bar on her wrist display crawl upwards. 10%. 30%. It felt like an eternity. Suddenly, klaxons shattered the silence. Not the soft chimes of the city below, but harsh, grating alarms emanating from the Nexus itself. Crimson emergency lights bathed the gantry in blood-red light. They know, Corvos yelled, yanking the spike free as the progress bar stalled at 67%. Security protocols kicked in early. Move, Kalen screamed, shoving him towards the pod. They sprinted back, boots clanging on the metal grating. Spotlights lanced out from the spire, pinning them in their beams. High above, sleek Kipther security skiffs detached from the structure, their weapons humming to life. They dove into the pod just as energy bolts sizzled past, melting the gantry where they'd stood. Boros slammed the hatch shut and fired the maneuvering thrusters. The pod shot away from the Nexus, tumbling end over end. Get us back to the Resolute, Kalen yelled, frantically scanning the sky. More skiffs were converging. Thorn, do you read? We're compromised. Abort! Abort! Static hissed in her ear. Then Thorn's voice, tight with urgency. Resolute is moving to extract. Hold on! They're scrambling the fleet. On the bridge of the Resolute, Thorn watched the tactical display bloom with hostile contacts. Dozens of Kada warships, sleek and deadly, were detaching from orbital docks, their weapons powering up. The ghost signal had been noticed. The intrusion confirmed. The hegemony was waking up. Full power to engines. Evasive pattern Delta. Thorn roared. Boros, Kalen, get that pod back inside now. The Resolute shuddered as its ancient engines screamed to life, lurching away from Viridia Prime just as the first Cathar energy beams lanced out, missing by kilometers but painting the void with searing light. The pod, a tiny speck, raced towards the open hangar bay. They made it. Barely. The hangar doors slammed shut as the first Cathar warship, the Purifier's Resolve, opened fire. The Resolute's shields flared violently, absorbing the blast, but buckling under the strain. Alarms wailed throughout the shields at 40%. Kalen reported, stumbling onto the bridge, her face pale. We only got 67% of the payload uploaded. 67% is enough, Thorn said, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen, where the Cathar fleet was forming a pursuit wedge. They know we're here. They know we're real, and they know we're coming for them. He gripped the command chair, a grim smile touching his lips. Now the real war begins. But as the Resolute plunged into the relative safety of the asteroid belt, dodging fire from the relentless Cathar hunters, a different kind of alarm blared on Kalen's console. Not tactical. Biological. Captain, she whispered, her blood running cold. The archive, the uploaded data, it's not just broadcasting out, it's triggering something inside the Cathar network. Something catastrophic. Look. On the screen, a news symbol flashed. A biohazard warning, but in Cathar glyphs, and beneath it, scrolling rapidly. A genetic contaminant detected. Source: Human Archive Fragment Delta 7. Threat level: Omega, initiating planetary quarantine protocol. Oblivion. Thorn's blood turned to ice. Oblivion protocol. He'd seen the fragmented references in the oldest, most damaged human records salvaged from the Purge. It wasn't just about erasing history. It was about erasing the future. Kalen, Thorn's voice was a death rattle. What does it mean? Kalen's face was ashen, her eyes wide with dawning horror as she translated the scrolling Cathar text. It means they're not just going to hunt us down, Captain. They're going to sterilize every system that ever had human contact. Every colony world we fled to. Every potential refuge. They're going to burn the entire galactic neighborhood to make sure not a single human cell, not a single trace of our DNA survives to contaminate their perfect future. The Resolute shuddered again, hit by a glancing blow. On the view screen, the lead Kalav warship, the Purifier's Resolve, loomed larger, its forward batteries charging with an ominous, building whine. But the true horror wasn't the ship chasing them. It was the realization dawning on Thorn's face, reflected in the terrified eyes of his crew. They hadn't just awakened a sleeping giant. They'd triggered its final genocidal solution. And the countdown to galactic sterilization had already begun. The Resolute wasn't running anymore. It was fleeing a funeral pyre. Behind them, Viridia Prime glowed with an unnatural, sickly green light, the activation signature of Oblivion protocol. Ahead, the Cathar fleet, led by the relentless Purifier's Resolve, herded them like cattle towards the outer rim, away from potential human hiding places, towards the cold, empty void where their destruction could be clean and final. The message was clear: you are the contagion. You will be contained. You will be erased. And everything you ever touched will be cleansed with fire. Inside the battered ship, despair warred with fury. Boros paced the engineering bay like a caged beast, his usual gruffness replaced by a hollow-eyed dread. They're going to glass every world, Eris. Every rock we ever called home. Billions gone, just to kill us. He slammed a fist against a bulkhead, denting the metal. What kind of monsters are they? The kind who believe purity is worth any price, Thorn replied, his voice low, standing over a star chart glowing on a cracked display. His storm-gray eyes scanned the sectors marked for sterilization, sectors where whispers of human survivors had persisted for centuries. Hope, now condemned. They see life as data to be curated. We're corrupted code, a virus in their perfect system. And their cure, he trailed off, the unspoken horror hanging heavy in the air. Kalen entered, her face drawn but resolute. She held a data slate. I've been analyzing the Oblivion protocol parameters, Captain. It's not just sterilization. It's targeted genetic annihilation, the weapon they're deploying, codenamed Scourge. It's designed to seek out and destroy specific DNA sequences, human sequences. It'll render entire biospheres inert, but leave Keter-compatible life untouched. It's elegant and utterly monstrous. Elegant, Boros spat. It's genocide wrapped in a pretty package. It's efficient, Thorn corrected, his tone grim. From their perspective, they eliminate the threat and preserve the resources. Cold, logical, the Deathworlder spirit they fear. Our chaos, our unpredictability, our sheer will to survive against impossible odds. It's anathema to their ordered existence. We're not just enemies. We're a flaw in their reality. He looked at Kalen. Any word from the fragments we uploaded? Did 67% get out? Kalen's expression tightened. It's spreading, like a digital plague. Encrypted packets are bouncing through neutral comm relays, piggybacking on commercial traffic. But the Cathar are hunting it down, node by node. They've already severed several major data conduits. It's a race against time. She hesitated. There's something else. A response. Fragmented. Encrypted with a key I've never seen. Originating from deep within Cathar space. Not Viridia. Thorn's eyes narrowed. A response. From who? Unknown, Kalen admitted. But the encryption, it feels organic, not Cathar. And the message fragment, it just says the fire remembers. Before Thorn could ponder the cryptic message, the ship lurched violently. Red lights strobed. Direct hit. Aft shields collapsing. A crewman yelled from the tactical station. On the view screen, the Purifier's resolve filled the frame, its weapon emplacements glowing cherry red. A voice, synthesized and devoid of inflection, echoed through the Resolute's comms, the voice of Fleet Commander Zorvac, captain of the Resolve. Human vessel, cease resistance. Surrender your biological matrix for analysis and neutralization. Compliance ensures a swift termination. Defiance necessitates the activation of Oblivion protocol on your current vector. Choose. Thorn didn't hesitate. He activated the ship-wide comm, his voice ringing with cold fury. Zorvac, you erased our past. Now you threaten our future. You think fire can cleanse what you fear? You think silence can bury the truth? We are the ghosts you created, and ghosts burn. He slammed his fist on the firing console. The Resolute's few remaining kinetic cannons spat projectiles, crude, slow, but aimed not at the Resolve's shields but at the delicate sensor arrays on its command spire. The impacts were insignificant against the warship's armor, but they were a message, a declaration. The Resolve's response was immediate and brutal. A lance of emerald energy tore through the Resolute's weakened aft shields, shearing off a section of the engine nacelle. Atmosphere screamed out into the void. Alarms. Engineering. Report. Thorn bellowed.
Boss, here.
The engineer's voice was strained, punctuated by the sounds of tearing metal and hissing plasma. Main drives crippled. We've got maybe 10 minutes of maneuvering thrusters left, and life support in sections 4 through 7 is gone. Abandon those sections, seal the bulkheads. Thorn ordered, his mind racing. They were dead in the water. The Cathar would board them, dissect them, and then unleash Oblivion on the nearest human habitable world, New Carthage. A refuge whispered about in the oldest survivor logs. Millions lived there, or had lived. Despair threatened to swallow him whole. They'd failed. They'd triggered the very apocalypse they'd sought to prevent. Then Kalen gasped. Captain, the unknown signal. It's broadcasting through the Cathar fleet's own comms network. It's overriding their channels. On the main screen, the image of Zorvac's impassive face flickered and dissolved, replaced by static. No, not static. A shifting, complex pattern of light and shadow, resolving into a face, but not human. Not Caith. Sleek, avian features. Large, intelligent eyes the color of molten gold, set in skin like polished obsidian. The being spoke, its voice a melodic chime layered with deep, resonant undertones that vibrated in the bones. Fleet Commander Zorvac of the Cathar Hegemony. Stand down your weapons. Release the human vessel. Zorvac's synthesized voice crackled back, laced with disbelief and fury. Identify yourself. This is Hegemony space. Your interference is an act of war. I am Kalen of the Veln. The avian being stated, its golden eyes seeming to pierce through the screen, locking onto Thorn's. And you, Zorvac, are about to commit an atrocity that will stain the galaxy for millennia. The humans you hunt, they are not the virus. You are silence. Utter, stunned silence, on the Resolute's bridge. Veln? The name meant nothing in human records. They were a myth, a rumor of ancient starfarers who vanished eons ago. The Vel are extinct, Zorvac retorted, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his synthesized features. Another human deception. Extinct? Kalen of the Vel let out a sound like wind through crystal chimes, a laugh. We merely stepped aside. We watched. We learned. And we remember what the Cathar tried to forget. Her gaze shifted back to Thorn, captain of the ghost ship. Your fragment reached us. The fire does remember. We remember the soul system purge. We remember the screams your ancestors sent into the void, screams the Cathar tried to silence. We remember the truth they buried. Thorn found his voice, rough with emotion. Who are you? We are the gardeners, Kalen of the Veln said softly. We tend the fragile blooms of sentience across the stars. We prune the blights that threaten the garden's balance. The Cathar, they are not gardeners. They are vandals. They seek to pave the garden over with sterile crystal. Her golden eyes hardened. Oblivion protocol is not pruning, Zorvac. It is arson. and we will not allow it. Zorvak's voice turned icy. You threaten the hegemony. You align with these biological contaminants. I align with life, Kalen of the Veln stated. With memory. With the right of a species to exist. Even if it is inconvenient. The humans are flawed. Chaotic. Dangerous, perhaps. But they are alive. And their story is part of the galaxy's tapestry. Whether you like it or not. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the Cathar fleet. Stand down, or face the consequence of your arrogance. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Resolve's weapons remained charged. The Vel ship, a vessel of impossible grace, seemingly woven from starlight and shadow, had simply appeared on the edge of sensor range, hung silently. Then Zorvak spoke, his voice colder than the void. Hegemony priority, containment. Oblivion protocol proceeds. Target, New Carthage. All vessels, engage the Veln interloper and destroy the human contaminant. The Cathar fleet shifted, weapons turning towards the Veln ship. But Keelan of the Veln merely smiled. A fleeting, enigmatic expression. So be it. Remember this day, Zorvak. Remember the fire you feared. Her ship vanished. Not with a jump, but as if it had never been there. One moment present, the next, gone. Leaving the Cathar fleet momentarily confused. But the reprieve was short-lived. New Carthage, Kalen yelled, pointing at the tactical display. A massive Cathar dreadnought, the scourge of purity, had detached from the main fleet and was accelerating towards the human refuge world, its bow glowing with the terrifying energy signature of the Oblivion weapon. They're going to do it, Bordos roared. Right now. Thorn stared at the display, at the tiny dot representing New Carthage, at the massive dreadnought bearing down on it. Despair warred with a sudden, desperate clarity. They couldn't stop the dreadnought. The Resolute was crippled. But maybe they didn't need to stop it. Maybe they just needed to be seen.
Keelan?
Thorn said, his voice suddenly calm, terrifyingly calm. Patch me through to every open comm channel. Hegemony, neutral, pirate, anything. Broadcast everything we have. The full archive fragment, the truth of the purge, the horror of Oblivion, and send a message to New Carthage. Tell them to look up. Kalen understood instantly. Her fingers flew. The Resolute's dying transmitters screamed into the void, not with weapons fire but with truth, images of Earth's burning cities. Audio logs of children crying in shelters. The defiant last stand of the Martian colonies, the raw, unvarnished agony and resilience of a species hunted to the edge of extinction, and the chilling details of Oblivion protocol. On the bridge of the Scourge of Purity, Fleet Commander Zorvak watched the human broadcast flood his systems. He saw the faces, heard the voices, felt the weight of the history his people had tried so hard to erase. For the first time, a flicker of something other than cold logic crossed his synthesized features. A hint of doubt. Disgust. It was quickly buried under hegemony doctrine. Contamination. Must be cleansed. Proceed with sterilization, he ordered. His voice flat. The dreadnought's bow pulsed. A beam of sickly green energy, thick as a continent, lanced out towards New Carthage. On the Resolute, Thorn watched the beam streak towards the distant world. He activated the ship-wide common one last time, his voice echoing through the dying vessel, meant for the ears of New Carthage, for the galaxy, for history itself. They erased our species from history. Now our warships burn their future to dust. He didn't mean the Resolute. He meant the truth. The truth was the warship, and it was burning. The green beam struck New Carthage's atmosphere. But instead of the expected silent, sterile annihilation, something unexpected happened. The beam splintered, fractured, like light through a flawed crystal. Great gouts of emerald fire erupted across the planet's surface, not the clean genetic white, but chaotic, destructive conflagrations. Cities burned, forests turned to ash, oceans boiled. It was horrific, yes, but it wasn't the silent, perfect sterilization the Cathar had planned. It was messy, chaotic, alive with destruction. And then from the burning world a new signal erupted. Not a broadcast of culture, but a scream of defiance. Millions of voices channeled through every comm device, every data terminal, every jury-rigged transmitter on New Carthage, amplified by the Veln's hidden network, screamed into the void, "We are still here." The message wasn't just heard, it was felt across the sector, across neutral space. Even faintly on Viridia, on the observation spire, High Curator Veln watched the tactical feed of New Carthage burning. He saw the chaotic fire, not the clean wipe. He heard the raw, unfiltered scream of survival echoing through secure channels. The Veln had somehow opened. His Chatin, usually placid blue, was now a deep, roiling crimson. Not just unease, rage, and beneath it a terrifying sliver of fear. The ghosts weren't just real, they were multiplying, and their fire was spreading. But the true devastation, the revelation that would shatter the Hegemony's foundation, came not from the burning world but from within Valen's own sanctum. As he accessed the deepest, most secure archives, the ones detailing the true origins of the human purge, a file long thought corrupted beyond recovery suddenly decrypted itself, triggered by the resonance of the human scream from New Carthage. The file wasn't a report, it was a confession, written by the first High Curator, millennia ago, the one who ordered the soul system purge. Veln read the words, his multifaceted eyes wide with dawning, soul-crushing horror. The purge, it hadn't been about aggression. It hadn't been about preemptive defense. It had been about envy, about fear of a species that thrived in chaos, that created beauty from suffering, that possessed a spirit so indomitable it threatened the Khmer's sterile, controlled existence. The first High Curator hadn't just wanted to eliminate a threat. He'd wanted to steal that spirit, to dissect it, to understand the fire that made humans burn so brightly in the dark. And in his arrogance, in his attempt to capture that fire, he'd unleashed something he couldn't control. Something that had infected the Kinthar genome itself. A latent genetic marker dormant for centuries, passed down through the ruling bloodlines. A marker that resonated with human DNA. A marker that made the Kinthar vulnerable to the very scourge weapon they'd created to destroy humanity. Oblivion Protocol wasn't just a weapon against humans, it was a genetic time bomb for the Cathar themselves. The fire they feared was already inside them. Veln staggered back from the console, his chitin flashing chaotic patterns of crimson and sickly green. The perfect order of the Hegemony, the pristine history, the sterile future. It was all built on a lie that was now consuming them from within. The ghosts weren't just outside the door, they were in the blood. The galaxy held its breath. New Carthage burned, a funeral pyre visible across light years, its chaotic flames a stark contrast to the Kathar's desired sterile void. The human scream, "We are still here," echoed through data streams, a defiant heartbeat in the cosmic silence. And on Viridia Prime, High Curator Veln stood paralyzed. The truth of his species' foundational sin and impending genetic doom crashing down upon him like a collapsing star. Aboard the crippled Resolute, Thorn watched the inferno on New Carthage. Grief warred with grim satisfaction. They'd failed to save the world, but they'd shattered the Kathar's illusion of control. They'd forced the galaxy to see, and they'd triggered something else. The Veln, the gardeners. Their intervention, though fleeting, had changed the game. "Kalan," Thorn rasped, his voice raw. "The Veln's signal. Can you raise them?" Kalan, her face smudged with soot and tears, worked furiously at her console. "Trying, Captain. Their signature, it's like trying to grasp smoke. But there. A response. Encrypted, but it's a coordinate. And a message. The garden needs tending. Come." The coordinate was deep in the uncharted Perseus Arm, a region rumored to be the Veln's ancient sanctuary. A refuge. A chance. But before they could act, the Purifier's resolve reappeared on the tactical display, flanked by 2 fresh cruisers. Zorvak's face filled the comm screen, but it was different. The cold certainty was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped fury and a flicker of something else. "Panic? Human vessel, your interference ends now. The Veln are heretics. Their sanctuary will be the next target of Oblivion. Surrender, or witness the cleansing of another world. Thorn met Sorvak's gaze, seeing the cracks in the Hegemony's armor. You're scared, Sorvak. Scared of the fire. Scared of the truth. Scared of what's inside you. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. We know about the marker. We know Oblivion burns your own blood. Sorvak flinched, a micro-expression of pure terror flashing across his features before the mask slammed back down. Lies, contaminant propaganda, but the denial lacked conviction. The seed of doubt planted by Veln's discovery and watered by the chaos on New Carthage was taking root. Maybe, Thorn said, a grim smile touching his lips. But even lies can burn, and your fleet, it's looking a little thin, Commander. Seems your own people are getting nervous. He gestured to the tactical display. Several Cathar ships on the periphery of the fleet had powered down their weapons, their transponders flickering erratically. Whispers of mutiny. Fear of the Scourge weapon turning on them. Sorvak snarled, a sound of pure, frustrated rage. Destroy them. Now. The Cathar ships opened fire, but the Resolute was already moving, not away but towards the burning hulk of New Carthage, using the planet's chaotic energy emissions and debris field as cover. Boros, working miracles in the ruined engineering bay, coaxed one last burst of speed from the dying engines. Kalen, plot a micro-jump. Use the planet's gravity well as a slingshot. Aim for the Veln coordinates, Thorn ordered. It's insane. The stress will tear us apart. Kalen protested, but her fingers were already flying. Do it, Thorn roared. Better torn apart than erased. The Resolute shuddered violently as it skimmed the edge of New Carthage's atmosphere, superheated plasma licking at its hull. Kalen initiated the jump sequence. The universe stretched, twisted, and snapped. They emerged not in the silent void but in a place of breathtaking, impossible beauty. A nebula unlike any other, not gas and dust, but swirling rivers of living light, vibrant blues and golds and violets, coalescing into vast, intricate structures that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic energy. At its heart floated the Veln sanctuary, not a city but a living organism of crystalline trees and flowing light, humming with ancient power. Kalen of the Veln's ship awaited them, a silent sentinel. The Resolute, battered and bleeding atmosphere, limped towards the sanctuary. As they drew closer, figures emerged. Vel, tall and graceful, their obsidian skin shimmering with internal light, their golden eyes filled with a profound, ancient sadness and hope. Kalen of the Veln greeted them not on a bridge but in a garden grown from starlight. You came, she said, her melodic voice resonating with warmth. The fire found its way. Thorn, leaning heavily on Kalen the human, surveyed the sanctuary. You knew about the marker, about the purge. We watched, Kalen of the Veln confirmed, her gaze distant. We saw the first High Curator's envy, his fear, his terrible mistake. We saw the fire he tried to steal take root in his own bloodline, a slow poison. We knew Oblivion would be his ultimate folly, a weapon that would consume the wielder. She looked at Thorn, her golden eyes piercing. We could have intervened sooner, but the garden requires balance. Sometimes the blight must reveal its own rot before it can be pruned. A New Carthage? Thorn asked, the grief raw in his voice. A tragedy, Kalen of the Vel said softly, but not an end. The scream was heard. Survivors will emerge from the ashes, and the truth is now a wildfire the Cathar cannot contain. She gestured to the swirling nebula. Here you are safe. For now, the sanctuary is hidden beyond their reach. You can rebuild. Remember. Thorn looked at his crew, Boros, weary but unbowed. Kalen, her eyes holding the weight of their history, the others scarred but alive. He thought of Earth, of Mars, of New Carthage burning. He thought of the Cathar, poisoned by their own arrogance, tearing themselves apart. No, Thorn said, his voice quiet but firm. We don't hide. Not again. They erased us from history. They tried to burn our future. Now, he looked towards the direction of Viridia Prime, his storm-gray eyes hardening into flint. Now we burn theirs. Kalen of the Veln studied him for a long moment. Then a slow, understanding smile touched her avian features. The fire remembers, and it demands justice. She turned to her people. Prepare the seeds of memory. It is time to tend the garden. The hegemony was fracturing. News of the genetic marker, leaked by terrified scientists and disillusioned archivists, spread like a plague through Viridia Prime. Panic replaced order. The sterile lavender glow of the city was now punctuated by the harsh red of riots. Canthar turned on Canthar, suspecting hidden human DNA in their neighbors, their leaders. Fleet Commander Zorvak, branded a heretic by some and a savior by others, struggled to maintain control, his own bloodline under suspicion. High Curator Veln, isolated in his spire, watched the collapse. The perfect archive was in ruins, not from external attack but from internal rot. The truth he'd spent centuries curating was a lie, and the lie was killing his people. Despair threatened to consume him. Then a new signal pierced the chaos. Not human, not Cathar. Veln. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation and a warning. Projected onto the skies of Viridia Prime, visible to all, was an image. The Resolute, not as a ghost ship but reforged. Sleeker, stronger, wreathed in the living light of the Veln sanctuary, and beside it, dozens, then hundreds of other ships, salvaged human vessels, retrofitted with Veln technology, crewed by survivors from New Carthage, from hidden colonies, from the very ashes of the Purge. A fleet born of fire and memory, and a message spoken in 1,000 languages, including the Cathar tongue. The erased have returned. The future you tried to burn is ours to forge. Stand down, or be pruned. Zorvak aboard the Purifier's Resolve, now surrounded by mutinous ships, saw the projection. He saw the reforged Resolute, a symbol of everything he'd been taught to fear and destroy. He saw the faces of the human survivors, not monsters but people, scarred but unbroken, their eyes holding the same defiant fire he'd seen in the archive fragments. He thought of the genetic marker in his own veins, the scourge weapon that could end them all. He made his choice. Instead of ordering his fleet to attack the approaching human Veln armada, Zorvak opened a channel to Viridia Prime, to every Cathar ship, to every citizen. His voice, stripped of its synthesized calm, was raw, human in its despair. The High Curator's lie is exposed. Oblivion is our death sentence. The humans, they are not the contagion. We are. Our fear, our arrogance, our refusal to remember. He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the void. Lay down your arms. Surrender to the gardeners. Let them tend the blight. His words triggered the final collapse. Canthar ships powered down. Ground forces stood down. The hegemony, built on a foundation of lies and fear, crumbled in a single day. The final confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. The human Veln fleet, a breathtaking fusion of salvaged steel and living light, arrived at Viridia Prime not to destroy but to witness, to ensure the pruning was done. High Curator Veln, alone now, walked out onto the observation spire. He saw the fleet hanging in the sky, beautiful and terrible. He saw Kylan of the Veln, standing on the bridge of her starlight ship. He saw Eris Thorn on the reforged Resolute, his face etched with the lines of centuries of survival but his eyes clear. Veln activated the planetary comms, his voice echoing across the silent, broken city. The archive is corrupted, born repair. The history is a lie, the future. He looked at the human fleet, then at the Veln. The future belongs to those who remember, not those who erase. He took a deep breath, the air tasting of ash and ozone. Initiate the purge protocols. On Viridia Prime. Gasps echoed across the comms. Not the Sol system purge. This purge. The self-destruct sequence for the hegemony's heart. No, Zorvak's voice crackled, filled with horror. Veln, don't. It is the only truth left, Veln said, his chitin fading to a dull, lifeless gray. The only way to cleanse the rot. He input the final command. Deep within Viridia Prime, ancient engines designed for planetary defense but capable of far more roared to life. Not to fire weapons but to destabilize the planet's core. The crystalline spires began to crack. Not from external force, but from within. The lavender sky darkened as the planet's energy grid collapsed. The human Veln fleet watched in solemn silence as Viridia Prime, the heart of the Hegemony, consumed itself. The fires that rose weren't green scourge beams, but the orange-red flames of a world tearing itself apart, a final self-inflicted act of atonement. The perfect archive burned. As the last spire crumbled into molten ruin, Kalen of the Veln turned to Thorn. The blight is pruned. The garden can heal. Thorn looked at the ashes of Viridia Prime, then at the faces of his crew, at the survivors from New Carthage, at the Veln with their ancient, knowing eyes. He thought of Earth, lost but not forgotten. He thought of the fire that had carried them through extinction. They erased our species from history, Thorn said, his voice carrying across the comms meant for the survivors, for the galaxy, for the future. But they couldn't erase the fire in our bone. They tried to burn our future to dust. He paused, watching the last embers of Viridia Prime fade against the starfield. A slow, fierce smile spread across his face. Now we build it from the ashes. The reforged Resolute turned away from the dying world, leading the fleet not towards the void, but towards the uncharted stars, towards the future. The ghosts were gone. In their place stood the architects of a new history, forged in fire, tempered by memory, and unafraid of the dark. The galaxy, scarred but alive, held its breath once more, not in fear, but in anticipation. The story wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time humanity would write its own chapter. In fire, in blood, in hope.